Still Point Radio, where it's all about the sovereignty of self, super elevated levels of freedom. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, and good evening, good day, good morning, wherever you may be. This is Ryan McMahon again, bringing you another brilliant podcast where we talk about the nature of reality, truth, consciousness, centeredness, still point, the nature of the self, life in time and being. Our intent here, as usual, is to unveil reality. Keep it real. Enjoy it and share. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. This is episode number 2 of Revealing Reality. I'm your host, Tyler Walker, and joined with me today is Ryan McMahon and Julie De La Garza.
Hello.
Hello.
And today we are going to be speaking with a close friend and business associate of Ryan's, who has quite a repertoire behind her. And rather than me mispronounce or say something incorrectly, I'm going to let Ryan go ahead and introduce our guest today.
Thank you, Tyler. Welcome back, everybody, to the second edition of Revealing Reality podcast, where today we have a special treat. We're joined here with a true horse whisperer, if I could say that. A lot of people just don't know what that term means, but we have an expert here and a close personal friend of mine. Her name is
Jane Bridgeman.
And just to give you a little background on her, she's a licensed massage therapist. She's also a doctor of chiropractic. She's a certified equine massage therapist. She is a holistic health practitioner, a master energy worker, a Reiki master, and a certified animal intuitive, focusing primarily on the beautiful four-legged equines. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome
Jane Bridgeman.
Hello, Jane.
Hi. Thank you. It is an honor to be here. Absolutely.
Oh, the feeling is mutual. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this with us. So, especially knowing the long list of amazing skills that you have that Ryan just listed off, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a background on yourself as to how you got into subtle energy work and this field that you find yourself in?
Sure. That's kind of a loaded question.
Just a bit.
Let's see. Well, I would go all the way back to when my life began being attracted to horses, which was kind of really interesting at age 2. I was, living in suburbia, America, and my parents got me a rocking horse for Christmas. And I can remember back to that day getting on that rocking thing and going, wow, everything lit up for me from the top of my head to the tip of my toes. It was like, this is it. Wow, I remember this from another lifetime. And it just kept going from then on through my life, although I took huge time out as I got into college. And oh my goodness, my life went in various directions. So much so that there was no space for a horse at all. And it wasn't until I had married and moved out to California and was living in a place where you could actually have land and horses that I was able to really, bring back my dream of being with horses all the time. And at that point, I started collecting horses to the extent where it was like, wow, this is really expensive.
I'm sure.
I'm wondering how I could make money from being around horses instead of spending money. And So my brain started churning. And to make a really long story short, I found that I could become an equine massage therapist quite simply. And so I went out and received my certification. Now, I have to say that what I was taught in my certification did not include anything about communication with the horse psychically, did not include any kind of energy work. It was just very straight up. You start at the tip of the horse's head, you rub here, A, B, C, D, E, F, make your way all the way to the tail of the horse and, slap your hands together and you're done. Ta-da. But once I started working with the horses alone, day after day after day, in stalls where nobody else is watching, the most amazing things started happening. The horses started talking.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how do you mean? Like, what do you mean they started talking to you?
Exactly. They were very, very kind in literally using very obvious body language to point things out to me, which at first I just ignored. I totally ignored it until it started happening from horse to horse to horse. And then I was seeing a pattern and I thought, wow, are these horses showing me things? And so I would start responding to what they were pointing to, and then to watch their bodily response to what I had just tapped into for them was the answer. And so I kept following this, voices, I guess. I don't know. I'm very empathic. So what I pick up on is a knowing. I don't really hear voices. I just all of a sudden understand what the horse needs and what the horse feels.
Jane, would you say it's more of, genuinely, like one might feel sadness or happiness, like just a core emotional feeling that you have rather than any particular word or association, if you will?
It definitely, I pick up on their feelings, but I also will have just a knowing of exactly what it is that they need in terms of care. If, for instance, I could just be doing my own thing, working on a horse, thinking, oh, this is nice for the horse. Let me rub the horse here. And all of a sudden, I will just go, oh my gosh, this horse's hind end needs work. And I'll just move to the hind end and there'll be one specific spot. My hand will be drawn to it. I touch it and the horse responds with amazing body language that can't be denied.
And so as far as that body language goes, and this is maybe hard to do without like seeing a model or having a horse in front of you, but I know from working with you and seeing you work with horses, I know some of these subtle cues. And how would you sort of speak to a person to describe them? Like, how would you translate a horse's body language in very, say layman or general terms to a person who's listening to us right now? What is it? Is it an eye bat, or is it an ear movement, or is it, a particular?
Good question. Yeah.
So yeah, what do you see that the average person who knows nothing about horse language or horse communication, what do you see that we don't?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Excellent question. And it's really important to spend a lot of time with horses to realize that every move that they make is important. Whereas humans, do you know how we talk with our hands and we just kind of move our hands around unconsciously as we're speaking, even as I'm doing right now?
Right.
If you were to tie my hands, I could still talk to you and get my point across to you very well without me waving my hands around.
Right.
So those are useless motions that we do as humans. Horses, on the other hand, they don't talk out loud like you and I do. And so every body motion that they have is their communication. And so something as subtle as a blink of an eye can speak 1,000 words. Wow. In terms of what the horse is trying to communicate to you, or a twitch of an ear, just a subtle change in their breathing, or something that we're all familiar with horses is the sound.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's so many body cues that they give you, and that becomes their language for me. It's just like having a conversation with a person.
I got to step in here and say something, Jane, because I remember working with you in your 70-hour course, and like I think most people look at a horse and go, "Wow, it's a huge animal. It's 1,000 pounds or more," and I'm somewhat scared or intimidated by it. And even though I knew I had to be there, and I knew I had to bond with these animals because in some sort of weird emotional spiritual way they called to me. That's another story for another time. But I remember working with you, and you were talking to me about their breath. And there was a horse, and I kept doing the massage techniques that you were giving me. Only I was putting a lot of distance between my body and the horse's body. And you kept going, no, you're reaching out. You're too far away. And I was like, there was something in me that was hesitant because it's such a large and powerful animal. And then, you coalesced me into actually putting my whole body right up on the horse's, belly. And
Hmm.
I'm standing there massaging this horse, and my chest is on, the horse's chest. And it was just a magical moment where I was like, "Whoa, this is something's going on here that I was previously unaware of." And it's hard for me to describe what happened, other than if I was going to just describe it, is just a deeper connection. And the horse, and I was able to maybe do a tiny bit of what you do, where I could listen to the animal where I couldn't listen to it before, at least not in the same way. So, and a lot of that for me was about the breathing, because my breath was going in and out with this barrel, this barrel chest of the horse going in and out. And so my breath and the horse's breath were coming together, and it was just an amazing thing. And so I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about subtle cues like the breath. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct. Yes.
I have a quick question for you, Jane. I am so captivated by everything you're saying. I have to tell you, I have a background in working with dogs. I was a dog trainer for a few years. And when I first moved out to San Diego, I was a dog walker. So my whole life for 2 years was getting up, putting on my workout clothes, going to people's homes, leashing them up, and just making these incredible connections. And similar to your story, I was able to really understand a dog from a whole different perspective. And I'm just so inspired. Like I wish I could translate how I'm feeling inside right now. I'm like, this is so amazing. Having said that, I want to know, because when you talked about you as a young woman learning about your connection with horses, and then you started realizing there was this other element to them, did that help you develop your intuitive sense, or was your intuitive sense already a part of you? Which one came first?
Yeah, I think the intuitive part was always there, but it certainly was not nurtured in my growing up. I was raised by very, I shall call them mainstream civilians. My parents, there was no holistic anything in my family, no energy, anything. Everything was just really straightforward, as most people are on the planet today, even. And so this was not, fostered. However, once I found myself in stalls alone with horses, then it was able to kick in. I mean, it was
Wow.
always there, but I had a really huge disconnect because I did not believe for the longest time that I was hearing this stuff. And so I would always second guess myself. And that's when I went into even more training with the woman who trained me psychically, because I
Mm.
knew that there had to be a higher level of belief. In the minute I actually tapped into that and said, yes, I know I am hearing these horses. I'm not crazy. I am not anthropomorphizing this, which is like putting your own feelings onto the horse, which is, just your own feelings. I'm not making any of this up. This is really for real stuff that I am picking up from these horses. When I was able to really believe that, then the floodgates just opened, and I just could hear everything all the time from that point on. So it
Wow.
was a process, it was definitely a process, but only my own process of believing and knowing that that's fully acceptable and okay. And it is who I am, and it is what I do.
And Jane, speaking to what you are, who you are, and what you do, something really powerful happened for me when I was with you and going through your training, your techniques, and it's it was basically this idea that the horse, like all of nature, but the horse in particular for our conversation, is somehow sacred. And I really found that to be true. And I think before I experienced, working with you and seeing what you do with horses, I might have just went, that's a nice idea. A lot of cultures have said, oh, the horse is sacred. Throughout history, the horse has been incredibly instrumental for man's development, and from travel to warmth, companionship, loyalty, trust, food, leadership, times of war, times of catastrophe. The horse has been by man's side for a long, long time. And so, my point is that what is it about the horse that, say, I'm not trying to belittle any other animal, but what is it about the horse that is, say, different from, you know, say a rabbit or a cat or something like what? Why is it that the horse is depicted in ancient mythologies, from chariots in the sky to the Awas rune of the Nordic Vikings as a spirit animal that takes you from one world to the next, to being statues of Genghis Khan on horses? What is so
Or even
special?
the mythological like prominence of the Pegasus throughout history.
Absolutely, yeah. So what is that, Jane? Like, what is it about the horse that is different and that makes it so sacred to humans?
Well, this is my theory. I've not read this in a book or anything. This is just what I've picked up from being around the horses. Horses to me are very similar to, let's say, whales or dolphins, who have very, very high vibrations. However, whales and dolphins are not as easily accessible to the everyday human as a horse is.
Right.
So the horse, in my estimation, is the most spiritual, high vibrational animal walking around on the planet that we can have contact with just about any time we want. And why horses are that, I do not know. I know that in the Bible, horses are spoken about a lot. So back in my hardcore Christian days, I could always justify my horse addiction by saying, hey, it's biblical.
Right.
And get away with that. But yeah, they are definitely sacred beings. And you find that out when you are in the still moments with them, and their heart, their electromagnetic field, their vibration just encompasses your entire being, and you shift as a person. And I think that's their whole purpose ultimately, at least as we launch into this Aquarian age, for sure. Now their purpose is definitely shifting. Ryan, you mentioned all the things through our evolution that horses have been through with us, and now we are actually living in a time where that is shifting again. Because currently at this time, I would say a horse's primary use, at least in our country, is for sport. And in a lot of other places on the planet, that's what horses are being used for, is sport. And there are still some areas where a horse is, a culture's work animal as well.
And Jane, you bring up such a good point. With what you just said and with what Ryan said, I think of the word horsepower, and we have it in cars, right? Mm-hmm. So I just looked it up, and horsepower is actually, it first was coined, the phrase, based on the steam engine, and steam engines were the most obviously important, one of the most important parts of our history industrially. And it was this man, I don't remember his name, something Watt. And he essentially said, this horse can turn this mill 144 times. And so now everything with cars and mechanical, anything that moves forward, is now based on the term horsepower. And it just makes me think, to both of your points, how important the horse has been, that was such a huge shift of moving from an animal doing all of this work and traveling and moving forward as humankind, now to cars. And I love, it's so exciting to hear that now that could shift again. So I just thought I'd make that point. I thought that was interesting.
Brilliant.
Yes. And if you are to read about like the totem or mystical meaning of a horse, it represents a journey. And that is truly why we are connected to horses, and why horses are connected connected to us is for the shift in our evolution, which right now, let me go ahead and finish, is to say that horses are now launching into a realm where they are here as spiritual beings.
Yeah.
For us to learn how to work with them, beside them, and let them take us on a journey into ourselves, deep within. And that's really where we're going in the Aquarian age, is learning who we truly are, tapping into our inner selves, connecting to source, and being authentic. And horses will demand that of you if you will but open up to it.
Yeah, no, you're hitting so many triggers for me right now. One of the things I've been pretty obsessed over since the whole 2012 idea, and everyone heard that first as catastrophism. I had to say, okay, that doesn't sound right, and went and looked it up. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with the whole idea of the Vedic yugas and what those represent as far as a spiritual evolution within man. And I find it really interesting that you're saying that, given the again, kind of the higher vibrational nature you were referring to. When you look at, for instance, like Plato's commentary on the Golden Ages or the Bronze Age or the Iron Age or any of that, one of the first things he says is a factor in the actual upward evolution, if you will, is that communication changes. And it transforms from being this clunky verbal thing that we're doing right now in this recording, which is attempting to use these things called words and letters, etc., to attempt to convey the thoughts within our head, which arguably it does a pretty poor job at, especially dealing with metaphysical things of this nature. Plato would say that's one of the first things to go, and we transform from being a verbal and an auditory communicator to a more telepathic and intuitive communicator. And what I'm hearing is that that's the relationship you've established with your horses. And that just, it blows me away, and I can't speak to horses because I haven't been around them too terribly much in my life, but I have been around dogs since I've been a little kid, just as Julie has. And having spent my whole life around them, I know what you're talking about, because I see that now that I've had that extended amount of time. They have feelings, and you pick up on it in that weird kind of knowing way.
Yes. And you hit the nail on the head, because you're alluding to the time factor. And that's it right there. Spending the time with the animal and looking for this stuff and being quiet enough that you will hear, which I think in today's society, we are so fragmented all the time, and we're so direct line with everything we're going to do. And we have such an agenda that, for instance, you could have a horse and spend time with your horse, but on your agenda, and never notice that that horse is there speaking to you every minute that you're with them. I actually did that myself for a good, 10 years. I just thought the horse was this thing that I hang out with and that I truly love, but I didn't realize there was so much communication coming from the horse to me.
Jane, I gotta speak about that time when you remember at Horse Spirit Ranch probably when this Navajo Comanche gentleman named Daniel Ramos came to do a blessing.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Okay, so
I do.
Tyler's question and your answer really prompt me to go right back to that time and my time with you and with him, because I've always resonated with the Native American spirituality because for a lot of reasons, but because they're so in tune with nature, right? And so, to make this real brief, Daniel Ramos, in full traditional Navajo Comanche regalia, goes in to do a blessing with these horses, and they're wild Mustangs, so they're not domesticated, and you could say potentially dangerous, right? Most people would think that. And watching this gentleman go in there and communicate with these horses in a way that you'd only see in some sort of Hollywood movie. And I've seen you do this as well. And that's why you're such a powerful guest for us here, is that you are able to speak to that intuitive, nonverbal communication that Tyler talked about and that Plato talks about. And so what I'm getting at is that I asked Daniel after that was done, I said, what happened in there? Like, why did those horses just graciously acknowledge you, were not afraid of you, and actually came closer to you in some sort of like, what did you do? How did you talk to them? What happened there? And he said, uh, they remember me from my ancestral lifetimes. He said they remember me and my people, and I'm dressed in my traditional regalia with my feathers and my wings and my medicine bag. And he goes, they recognize me. And to some people they'd say, oh, that's just hogwash. Like, what are you talking about? But I know Daniel is talking about what you're talking about, where there is something that is intuitive, or let's say, you know, beyond typical communication, that those animals didn't run from. They actually were gravitated towards him. And they knew that there was something about this person who is not a threat, is not a predator, but is offering something that is beneficial to the horses. And that was just a powerful way of communication. I think that you do that. Actually, I know that you do that, and I know it's hard to translate that to the average person. But if you can speak upon that anymore, that would be great.
Hmm. Yes, I'm really glad that you brought that up. There is an element to this whole thing which really requires a lot of responsibility on our behalf as humans. I'm sure you all have heard of Heart Math, the Heart Math organization.
Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely. They do
absolutely.
great
Yep.
work.
Yeah, and they've, of course, done a lot of studies now with humans. And there have been some horse people now that have taken that whole method of studying and translated it over to horses and humans, and what happens between horses and humans when they get together vibrationally, right? And what they found was that horses naturally will be attracted to certain people based on the heart rate variance of that human being.
Wow, no
And,
kidding.
and kind of what that boils down to for the layman is how centered a person really is. And horses are attracted to that. But what's even really more impressive is that the further that they did these studies, they found out that the humans ended up in training to the horse's heart rate variance ultimately.
Jane, would you say that's because arguably the horse is more in tune with what we might call the natural energies, and that being physically in their field attempts to, or in this case does, kind of reharmonize our energy fields with one that is in tune per se?
Yes, I would very much agree with that.
Jane, I had a quick question. So earlier you mentioned they are one of the highest vibrational animals. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what if you were to put a purpose on what a high vibrational animal would do? Because one of the things I've been studying personally is the, let's call it destiny, to your point, Tyler, words are so limiting, of a specific species being on the planet. Are they here to help the consciousness of humanity change? Are we here to help them? Because so many people are like, you hear that when you're little, some people say animals don't have souls. And I think all four of us can agree that's ridiculousness.
Right?
We're
That's
just
a
like,
lie from the pit of hell
okay.
right there.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
so it's kind of like we're dealing with this way where animals serve humans, and they're the beast, and they see it as kind of this lower entity to us. So what's your thought on their relation to humanity?
Yeah, wow. They are absolutely, I always say this. When I'm teaching my students, I'm teaching them all these things they can do to help the horse, to heal the horse, to make the horse perform better. La 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 la. And then I always preface it with, or say at some point, but remember, the joke is really on us, because all the while you're doing this, they are healing you.
Yeah.
They are here for us, no doubt. They are far smarter than us, spiritually, I think I would have to say, and innately. Granted, we're very intelligent. We can figure things out. We have different, thinking mechanisms than a horse does, but they're definitely smarter than us, without a doubt, when it comes to emotional and spiritual things. And they are here on the planet for our further evolution. They've always been here, and they've just been patiently going along with us every step of our slow evolutionary way, you know?
Yeah.
And we're finally getting into the ages now where we're getting to higher vibrations as humans, and the horses are right there for us to carry us through this transition into higher places.
You
Wow.
know, Jane, if I could, I wanted to talk about that emotional intelligence, if possible, because um, I myself, you know, I can speak to this out of experience, but I've noticed that a lot of cultures revere the horse as being some sort of very male female balanced spiritual animal. And so when I think about emotional intelligence from my background, you know, this is my vantage. I study esoteric mysticism and philosophy and psychology. And so I come from this place where if you're not balanced with your masculine and your feminine energies inside your being, then it's going to show in some way, whether it's going to show in your physical body, your emotional body, you know, your spiritual body or whatnot. And so I'm wondering if in your training you realize or recognize anything that has to do with male female energy when it comes to horses.
Can you give me a more specific thing that you're driving for?
Well, I know a lot of times people look at the horse as being this very masculine, strong animal, and that like when I first started riding horses, doing trail rides and doing adventure tour leading and stuff like that, I loved being on a horse, you know, but I always looked at it like this thing is strong and this thing is big and this thing is like very masculine energy. And it wasn't until I started to work with them and listen to them that I realized, for one, my perceptions were totally wrong. Yes, yes, they're strong, but they're also incredibly sensitive and intuitive. And so it's like a lot of people treat a horse as if it's a work commodity, and they go, "Ah, this horse can handle it." You know, smack it around, put a bit in its mouth, ride the hell out of it, and it wasn't. It took me a while to realize that, like, you know, they're actually incredibly sensitive beings, and just because they look big and you can see their muscles, it doesn't mean they're like this macho creature. And so the way I translate that is that they're a really, really good balance emotionally, or I should say, they're a really good reflector emotionally of a balanced male female being.
Yes, yeah, I absolutely agree. They are, and they are by far so much more sensitive than most people could ever imagine. Literally, one fly can land on a horse's body anywhere. And you know how light a fly is. One fly can land on a horse's body, and that horse can feel it and shake their skin exactly where that fly is to rid itself of that fly. That's how sensitive they are. So, what they have endured from the hand of man through time is heart wrenching to me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And they're yet so forgiving and so willing to give us another chance. And there's a whole movement that has actually done studies to show what a bit does to a horse, the metal thing that
Oh,
you
yeah.
put in a horse's mouth to control it. They've done all these amazing studies to show how painful and cruel a bit really is, and how it lights up their entire nervous system with just unbelievable shooting pains through their body. And we use that to control the horse as we ride. And then they've also done studies on what a saddle and the weight of a rider does to a horse's back. And it's absolutely astonishing that horses acquiesce and will even let us ride them, when really this is not what they were designed for. And so this whole movement that has studied all of it, it's their goal to get all this information out to people. And I think ultimately they would love to convince everyone to stop riding their horses the way that they do. Just stop riding, period. And that would be in a perfect world, and maybe thousands of years down the road in our evolution, that's where we will be with the horse. But right now, from where I stand, I can see that people aren't going to just completely stop, even if they hear all these studies. And they're just not going to stop using their horses the way they do, because actually it's quite enjoyable. And so my part in this whole thing where I come in is to create a bridge, kind of, because I see and I know that people won't stop riding their horses, and horses are going to endure a lot of hardships at the hand of man. What can I do to make life more enjoyable for the horse? And so, knowing that people will not stop doing what they're doing, I feel compelled to do what I do, which is to come in and love the horse unconditionally for at least an hour while I'm working with the horse, and communicate with the horse, and to have conversations, and to let that horse know how magnificent he or she may be, how special that horse is, to listen to that horse's needs and desires, and to help communicate those to the owner so that we can shift things up in that horse's immediate environment to make life better for him. And a lot of times horses are so distraught and so disconnected from themselves that they're literally, their spirits are outside of themselves, and they are empty shells going through the motions here. And so part of my job also is to bring the horses back into their bodies, to make it a safe place for them to be, so that they want to come in and participate with whatever it is that they're here on this planet to do. And these are all like really amazing, exciting things to do with horses.
Yeah, that's huge, Jane. Thanks for sharing that. 'Cause what I'm hearing, and I mean, this is so perfect of an example, is that seems like a microcosmic version of what we as a human species seem to be doing to our own Earth. That we're abusing literally everything we have at our disposal because, to kind of use a term you just used, it's fun and it can be enjoyable, but we're doing it to our own detriment. And I hear so much of that in what you're speaking to as far as what we as humans do with horses. But I wanted to ask you one thing real quick, to kind of harp on what Ryan was just asking you, as far as the duality of male and female energy within a horse. In your wealth of experience you've developed with that animal, and seeing that relationship and the kind of cohesion of the male female energies within a horse, can I ask you, has that affected how you are yourself? Do you notice that male femaleness within you? Have you gotten to a point where you said, I need more of this one energy? Or?
Good question.
Good question. If it were not for horses, I myself would not be evolving into the person that I am. And I am just so thankful that my path has joined up with horses. And this, I don't know what else on this planet could have woken me up and brought me to such a knowing of who I am. And it's absolutely on a daily basis. Horses teach me every single day. Every single time I have a session with a horse, it's almost hard for me to believe that I'm getting paid to spend this time with the horse, because I'm gleaning all of this information that is changing me from my core, from the inside out.
I think that always is an indicator you're in the right field, is where you question, like, how am I getting paid for this? Because I love it so much. You know, they always say follow what you love, and that's amazing that you get to do that. I had something to add about the emotional intelligence you guys are bringing up, which I love so much. I was reading this amazing article on the length of your hair being. They're actually doing studies on the emotional depth of a human based on the length of their hair. And I've always thought when I was a kid, I'm like, how come it's like the hippie guys that like grow out their hair and they're like, peace and love, let's all play drums and hug, you know? And then women, a traditional sign of femininity has been length of hair. And women are connected with the moon. Women are very, very intuitive. Women are very emotional. So when we're talking about the horse, I'm sitting here thinking about, when you talked about the fly landing on the back, I'm thinking, well, all of those receptors from every single little hair, but at this, and I don't mean that in a physical way. I mean that in an emotional way. And then I imagine this beautiful tail and the long mane, and how in native culture, I mean, do they not ride the horse by holding on to the mane and it's just bareback, correct?
Well,
Or am I
yeah,
imagining
no,
Hollywood in my head?
no, there are times where native cultures have done that, but they developed, a basic halter as well. But it just typically for many years, obviously before metallurgy, it would have been a bitless halter.
Okay.
And I know, Jane, you might want to speak on that more, but I know from just working with native cultures actually on certain reservations that a lot of them still practice a natural horsemanship without a bit for those traditional reasons. What do you think of that, Jane?
Well, yeah, personally, if you're going to ask me about bits and natural horsemanship and no bits and all of that controversial stuff, I'm absolutely for not using a bit. I personally think it's a horrific device that we've come up with. And the truth of the matter is, if humans would take the time to establish a relationship with the horse that they're going to ride, and it's going to take time to establish that relationship, and a lot of work, and a lot of patience, and a lot of love, and a lot of understanding, and a lot of willingness to be humble, to establish that relationship and then ride a horse, you will not need, in my belief system, you do not need a bit, because there is such a connection and such a bond and such respect between you and this creature that you don't need to have this metal gag to stop the horse from doing what the horse might want to do.
Yeah, what I found really interesting what you just said, Jane, is you kind of put it in a means of saying we have to exist with the horse, not outside of it and its ecosystem. And again, I mean, I'm thinking back to this kind of micro to macrocosm relationship that us as humans have with horses, and then that we also have with, as a species, with the world. And it's I mean, really indicative of Western culture, especially, but the fact that we have kind of, as a species, divorced ourselves from nature, I think feeds into this kind of domineering, I should say, lack of respect that we have toward this animal and with the larger ecosystem in which we live. And I find it really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think that is a huge lesson to apply not just to horses, but to our entire natural environment, that we don't exist separately from it, but are intimately connected and a part of what, I mean, otherwise we would call the circle of life.
That is so true. And now you're just really starting to connect all the dots and see in how many ways horses can help us to evolve as people.
That, Tyler, that makes me think of this quote that I had prepared. But this is a perfect time to just speak really about man's antipathy to nature, and how his antipathy to nature does reflect in his culture or his society. Um, of course, when the male female is imbalanced, you're going to have either a patriarchal dominated society or a matriarchal dominated society. And so this quote speaks a bit about nature, and it's by Walter Russell, who I keep talking about, but I'll go ahead and read it now. It is now time that man must realize that the key to nature's secrets can never be found in the visible universe. It can only be found in the invisible universe, which creates and controls the visible, but we cannot know the invisible universe because we cannot see it. Man says, as the spiritual nature of man unfolds, he becomes aware of the fact that he can see one half of the universe and never know it, and the other half he can know but not see it. I know that's kind of lofty language, but it's speaking about man's antipathy to nature simply because he can't quantify it, right? So the scientists always say, and that's a big lump. I'm lumping all scientists together in sort of that left brain, very mainstream academic science.
What we might call scientism, if you will.
Yeah, scientism, they would always say, hey, if I can't quantify it, if I can't touch it or smell it or see it or measure it, then it does not exist. And to me, this is retarded, and in my current culture I grew up in, I've been trained to think that way. And it's so painfully obvious that nature, which is our greatest teacher, does not teach that. And if you hold that belief, I kind of look at it like a big red flag that you do have some sort of fear of nature or some sort of antipathy to nature. And your work with horses just brings you in every single day into a living animal, which is nature. But also, I know a lot of times that you're out in nature when you're connected to a horse.
That's correct. It's well, and I do have to say that, yeah, I was painfully disconnected from nature for many, 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 many years of my life. And there's just another beautiful element that the horse has brought back to me, is that connection of being in nature and the horse being nature itself and tapping into all the vibrations and the rhythms of the earth, which I was ignoring. I don't even know how I can live day in and day out by ignoring these vibrations, but I did it successfully. But here I am now, so drawn to it on a daily basis that I can't live without it now. The nature. We are of the earth. We are of the planets. We are of this cosmos. And likewise, the horses are too. And they just bring this to you so loud and clear.
You make me think of one of my favorite Alan Watts quotes, who says he's discussing the Western mindset as it's different from the Eastern mindset, and he says it's a perfectly normal question for a child to ask, or I should say, a child to say, excuse me, that I came to this world, as if to come from somewhere else, whereas an Eastern culture would say I came out of it. And I think that's just perfectly complementary to what you're saying.
Yes, indeed.
Hey, I had a question. You were talking about this natural horsemanship. You guys keep bringing that up, and I am so interested. Can you tell us what that looks like? Can you kind of describe to us? Because I'm trying to visualize it, but unfortunately, I grew up on a ranch as a little girl in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And we had a lot of horses, and we had chickens and turkeys and all kinds of cool stuff. And we'd go in the arena, and we'd run around in a circle in the snow outside. It was so exciting. Oh my gosh, I loved it. So I'm sitting here trying to imagine what that would be like, natural horsemanship. So could you explain what that's like? I can't even imagine it. It's like either no saddle or saddle. So I'm like, I don't know what that looks like.
Not necessarily, but if you were out running around with your horses as a little girl, that's very close to natural horsemanship. There's been a huge movement, and it's called natural horsemanship. But within that umbrella of natural horsemanship, there's many different, how do I say it? Many different levels of natural horsemanship, or different belief systems of natural horsemanship. And it itself, natural horsemanship, even to this day, is evolving. Thank goodness. So I guess, as you would say, natural horsemanship is doing things that promotes the horse-human relationship, rather than utilizing the horse and making it do things because you're the dominant one and you say what's going to happen with this thing that you treat like a dirt bike. And so we've moved out of that time where we are treating horses like that for the most part. And natural horsemanship has become a very accepted way of training horses, communicating with horses, getting horses to do what you want while letting them believe that it's their idea. So everyone's happy. And I said it's even evolving now, because it's becoming, it's progressing even to, rather than trying to make the horse believe that what we're doing is his idea. Now we're moving into, with true natural horsemanship, establishing a partnership with communication, with no agenda on the human's behalf, and just opening up to see where the horse will take you willingly.
Wow, that's really, really amazing.
And that may include riding the horse. It may not. It may include a saddle. It may not. It may include a halter or a bridle and a bit. It may not.
Oh, wow. So it's different from horse to horse and person to horse, that relationship.
Yeah, it really is. And my belief is that as long as both you and the horse are willing, then whatever the horse is willing to permit and everyone's happy with it, then that's what can be done with the horse. Where I actually have 2 horses myself. And one of them, I can ask her, may I get on today? Can I ride you? And she will either say yes and stand there and allow me to get on, or she'll look at me and say, I'm out of here. And she'll just walk away. And I have to receive that and honor that.
You're amazing. That is amazing.
You know, Jane, you mentioned that the idea of treating a horse like a dirt bike, and so that brings back into me this idea that the horse, to some degree, for a lot of people, has been treated as some sort of mechanistic, a machine. Like a dirt bike is a machine meant for a use, either a use of fun and sport or a use of transportation. So we kind of already touched on this, but when people treat a horse as, as something that they own for a purpose, do you think that they're sort of abusing their relationship with the creature? Or do you think that nature...
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I mean, do you think that nature, allows this to go on? Or because, let's say, for hypothetical purposes, that like human beings are, say, superior to the animal kingdom, and that nature says, yeah, go ahead, abuse whatever you want? Or do you think that, this mechanistic thing is just a reflection of our, our deep-seated, again, antipathy to nature?
Can I add something in there real quick before you answer, Jane? One of the things I'm thinking about as I'm hearing Ryan's question here is, and forgive me, I forget where the concept came from. It was probably someone else's podcast, but there's a very interesting theory, which is that the reason we're so prone to treating not just horses, but nature as a whole in that kind of mechanistic manner, it seemed to be from the kind of Catholic or Christian faith and its domineering attitude in the entire Western world, in so far that both, I mean, regardless of the domination, or excuse me, the denomination of Christianity or that kind of motif that you stick to, they all have the promise of heaven. And it's kind of taught, because I was raised Christian. My mom was raised Catholic. And there's always this kind of, well, you know what? The world doesn't really matter because this is a way station. The real thing is heaven, which comes after. And it kind of takes this sincerity away from the world that we're currently in, because it's, after all, nothing in contrast to
like
this
a lack
other
of
idea.
accountability,
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of like,
exactly.
doesn't matter if I'm here, so I can do whatever I want because I'm going to heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Okay, so what's our basic question?
yeah, I was just gonna say. So what was Ryan saying?
I know. It's kind of a roundabout thing, but well, just this relationship that that man could sort of control another creature for his or her own personal uses, or personal reasons. And I guess this speaks to having a pet as well. Like, you own 2 horses, Jane, and you practice natural horsemanship, and I'm sure that your approach to the way you treat your pets, if I can call them that, could be just miles away from the way, say, an owner of a performance horse or an Olympic horse is treated. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And this is really cool because horses have taught yet another thing to me, which is how subtle abuse really is. And, it wasn't that long ago as humans, we weren't even allowed to speak about the abuse that went on in our homes. And now, of course, now we can talk about all of that. But when you think of domestic abuse, it's pretty darn violent still. Like, it's big time stuff. People are getting slapped around, and emotional abuse is huge, and all the kind of stuff that goes on. And what horses have taught me is that abuse is so much more subtle than that. It is the thoughts of your shadow side, your dark thoughts, your intentions, your vibrations that dwell in your heart. If they are not of admirable things, that's abusive. Just the way that we treat each other as humans, even when we think it's good, is abusive. And I've learned this from the horse, because I see horses in all kinds of lifestyles. And I want to speak about the ones that are cared for by extremely wealthy people. And the horses have all the food they need. They get brushed by grooms and taken care of and, taken out of their stalls a certain time of day and turned out into a pasture for a certain amount of time. And I mean, they really lack for nothing, but yet I see the abuse. And that abuse is simply that there is no heart connection for this horse to anyone. And no one person is truly connecting on an authentic level with the horse, even though you see these people doting on their horses and loving them. So this is a good thing. They're not being cruel to the horse. And people would think that I'm crazy with this assessment that I'm sharing with you.
Not us.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the true tenderness that needs to be there, and the stillness, and the asking of the horse, what is it, horse? Why are you in my life? Why are
Yeah.
you in my life? Not why, I bought you, horse. We're going to
Yeah.
ride and we're going to go to this show and I'm going to look good. And, all of this kind of stuff. And, oh, you're such a good horse because you're just here for me all the time. It's just so backwards to me when I watch this stuff happening, even with the horses who are being very well taken care of. There's such a huge hole missing element, and it's the heart connection. And that speaks to the abuse that we have for each other in humanity too, even in married couples and mothers to children. And I could go on and on with the different kind of relationships that we have. There is a very high level of abuse between us.
Very well said, Jane.
And
Yeah, oh God, totally. And I have to interject here for a second because I just started reading this book called The Source Field Investigations by David Wilcock. And there is an incredible portion of this book that covers exactly what you talk about. There's a man, and I can't remember, I think Tyler, you guys, I think we've talked about this before. There's a man who back in the day did these tests, these scientific tests. He was an actual scientist, and he hooked up these plants to electromagnetic fields. And he had them so where you, quote, bought them. It's everything we're talking about. You own the plant, they're in your field, and they're actually connected to your heart energy. So he did these tests where he would go off out into the world, and he was in like New York City, right? And he was like states away from where his plants were. And he would time it to where he was constantly testing what the plants were vibrating at all moments of the day, 24 hours a day. So he had these moments of pure joy, of disappointment, of sadness, and he would notice these spikes and these peaks, or the plummets and peaks of these fields of these plants and what they were vibrating at. And what the essential conclusion he came to was, it's not just, he did tests physically, like if I hold, a flame to it, yeah, the plant was like scared in the same way that humanity would be scared for its life. He noticed that it was even the intention of him connecting with, he even noticed like washing out the bacteria in the sink because there was going to be the death of all these tiny little bacteria. And that kind of made me think like, well, gosh, how do I live in this world every day? So here's the conclusion he came to, was that if your intention every moment of your life is thanking with gratitude, with understanding, and with a sense of cohesivity of, I'm in this cycle, thank you for your contribution. I'm doing my best to work within what works for you, and I vibrate love. He noticed that was the number one thing that stopped these spikes and these plummets of these plants basically feeling fear. And that actually made me feel so much better, but I was just blown away. So everything you just said just totally lines up with this really remarkable piece of information I got.
You're both hitting on something I think is super duper duper important right now, which is the whole concept of intent. And I've read that book as well, Julie, and it's making me think back, actually, weirdly enough, to an episode of Mythbusters. And they did a test where they actually hooked up a polygraph, like a lie detector, to the leaves of a houseplant. And they were trying and doing experiments to see what they could do to get a change in the regularity of the polygraph test. And the one big thing they saw that made a distinctive jump in the polygraph was not just the flame itself. If they just held the flame, and held it there at a distance, it didn't record anything. But it was only when Tori, one of the guys at Mythbusters, had the intent and the thought behind it of, I'm going to hurt this plant with this flame, did the polygraph actually hit.
And Tyler, I need to say this is fascinating, because what the heart math studies and the people that did their studies with the horses branched off of the heart math, they found this as well. If the people that they would put into an arena with horses just wandering around, the horses would stay away from the people if the people were told to think of low vibrational things, fear,
Wow.
anger,
Yep.
frustration, malintent. And then they would have the people change their intent to love and peace and forgiveness and joy. And the horses would stop and look at the people as soon as they would change their intent and come over to them.
Wow.
And I have to say that totally transforms the woo-woo into the science and the real, right?
Mhm. Yes,
Well,
absolutely. It's about
that's a
darn time those
good point.
scientists are catching up,
Yeah,
right?
to give, I mean, just to give something else to the skeptics out there who think this is all just bullshit. All I can think about in hearing this conversation right now is the work of Dr. Masuro Emoto, who did his
Right,
famous
right.
water
The
tests,
water,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
sitting there and just using intent at nothing more than a glass of distilled water makes a fantastically huge change in the actual crystalline structure of the water molecules. So it's not just something we're imagining, because there is measurable and distinct change to our physical reality based on something as simple as our intent.
Absolutely.
Well, that also brings me to this idea that the rehabilitation side for like prisoners or people that have been to war or any kind of trauma, emotional trauma. A lot of times, you'll see these programs out there, and I know Jane, you work with them sometimes too, where someone who's had some sort of abuse or some sort of trauma can go spend time with horses. And what I'm getting at here is like you never see, or I don't want to say never, but I've never seen, come sit with squirrels and meditate with them, or it's like you never see that. You just don't see like, let's hang out with, I mean, you see it with dolphins and you see it with whales if they're accessible, like you said earlier. But people, for some reason, get something vibrationally out of holding space or sharing space, interacting their energetic toroidal fields, their heart fields with these animals. And it's just really, really interesting. And so, speaking again, people that are skeptics, um, if you're a skeptic, I would just recommend, finding someone who actually understands this type of horse language, like Jane, and spending time with a horse, even if it's just a few minutes. It can really, really be an amazing reflector for your own personal situation in the current moment that you're in.
And I think if you don't have the ability, I think that's such a good point. If you don't have the ability to spend time with a horse, and I'm going to get a little woo woo here for just a second, because that's what I do. When we talk about the horse totem and we talk about horse medicine and energetic horse teachings, visualizing horse energy is incredibly powerful. And it's any animal, to your point of like, what do squirrels do? What whale do? A dolphin? And I don't know how you all feel about that, but I heavily believe in animal medicine and then coming into your life and influencing you.
I'm tracking right along with you, Julie. Yes, I am all about animal medicine in every way, shape, and form. And that's just one more level of awareness, though, that humans need to have to know that these things are available to them, provided by nature. And how many people don't ever think like that,
Yeah, seriously.
That makes me want to bring up this quote from Black Elk. He, along with the Native Americans that have always been really attuned to nature, speak about that stillness that you talk about and that peace that you talk about. And so I'm going to read this quote that Black Elk so eloquently put when it comes to peace or peace of mind. He said, "The first peace, which is the most important, is that which comes within the souls of people when they realize their relationship, their oneness with the universe and all of its power. And when they realize that at the center of the universe dwells Wankantanka, which is the spirit, and that the center is really everywhere, it is within each of us."
Nice, Ryan.
Thanks.
That's
I
a
love
great
it.
quote, man.
And I just have to add, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but horses for me have been amazing reflectors, showing me exactly where I'm at in my journey, which has not always been something that I've wanted to see, but they're very honest. And um, great, I just lost my train of thought there. Okay.
No
Well,
problem.
no, I kind of know. I kind of know what you're talking about, Jane, because you've taught me this before. Is that this basic idea that human beings are really good liars, even
Thank you.
even
Yes.
if they don't realize they're lying.
Mhm.
And so, one thing's for sure is that a horse is not going to lie to you. So I think that's what you were hitting on.
Yeah, it is. And what that ultimately reveals, and this is where I lost my train of thought, what it ultimately reveals is where you are at in understanding how to love yourself.
Wow.
Snap.
Absolutely.
When you start to really access that and come to grips with it and to start to accept yourself and learn how to love yourself, which is no easy task.
Right.
It should be, but it's not.
Right.
When you really start to access that, if you are around horses consistently, you can see the shift. They will reveal that to you. They will respond to you in a completely different way than they did, 5 days ago before you had that aha moment.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Well, Jane, as we begin to wrap up here, we're a little over the hour mark now. I wanted to ask you just one question, and by all means, feel free to be as brief or as lengthy as you'd like. But I'm just curious: does your kind of proclivity to understanding these subtle energies of, I mean, especially the horse, does your relationship with that other kind of part of the world, that very right-brained aspect of your consciousness, does that translate outside of your relationship with horses, maybe for instance to other people? And if so, how has that affected you?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, if it had not been for the horse coming into my life, I myself would not be changing the way I am, and therefore it changes my way of interacting with everybody on the planet, everything on the planet, and understanding the planet itself. It's absolutely, the horses have opened my eyes to realms that I never knew were there, never knew I needed to explore. And now that is where I live.
Right
Wow.
on. Beautiful.
That's so great.
Awesome. Well, Jane, thank you so much for spending this time with us. This was truly a pleasure. I'm so stoked you had an opportunity to do this with us, and I hope you would like to come do it again sometime.
I would love to. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
And you're our first official podcast guest.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Thank you, Jane. So nice to have you on here. Your energy and your aptitudes are really, really brilliant, and I think everyone who takes the time to listen to this will will gain something, something of use for them. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I'm totally honored. Everything you said resonates so much. I can't go into depth. And one last thing that I want to just point out is that I had whale figurines and horse figurines as a little girl. Humpback whales and horses were my fave. So I feel like I'm
Yeah,
in the club.
Absolutely. Oh,
Just
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I've been whale watching, and
Ah,
the first time I
beautiful.
saw a whale, I could do nothing but break into tears. There
Yeah.
was so much emotion being
Mhm.
transmitted from the whale,
Mhm.
and I think I'm the only person on the whole boat crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get you so much.
Yeah. Hey, Jane, one more thing. Is
Mhm.
there anything that you want to share with the guests? Like, I know you're working on. I know you've written texts. I know you've done books. Textbooks on the technicalities of working on a horse, doing massage and energy work. But I also know that you have other projects going on in your life right now, and if there's anything you want to share with everyone out there as to what you're interested in, or if you want to plug your website, please do so.
Wow. What an opportunity, right? To just get it all out there. And I'm thinking, no, there's nothing I really want to say.
Well, you don't have
Um,
to. It's totally up to you.
uh, oh gosh, yes, everything's just in a shift right now for me, Ryan. So it's hard for me to, I don't even need to promote any one thing. I just know that my current goal is to bring this information to the world at large. And I will be attempting to do that through the media of television. And that is my latest endeavor. So everybody just keep your fingers crossed for that one. And hopefully I'll be seeing you out there in TV land.
Awesome. And everybody, we will have all necessary links to Jane and her work on the podcast website, which will be up when this episode goes live as well. Awesome, Jane.
Great.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. We really appreciate your time. All right, everybody. That was Jane Wesson with quite a lot of insightful things to say. I don't know about you, but that resonated within me a lot. She had so much intelligence that she's been able to learn and translate through her relationship with horses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own personal stories, but I just got to say, from working with horses personally, I definitely changed. My life changed. My emotional intelligence changed, obviously for the better. And it's just they are really special creatures.
So one of the things I think it's worth mentioning, and please correct me if you guys feel otherwise, the things that Jane's been able to learn, and Ryan as well, and the advancement in their own spiritual development that has come from their relationship with horses is not exclusive to a relationship with horses. I think everything we've discussed today, and especially the kind of, for lack of a better term, higher vibrational information, can be learned through any facet of nature. Horses just, I think, happen to be one side of that infinite gemstone. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's especially since we are all individually vibrating beings. You know, for her, she felt like a past life connection. She knew that was her destiny.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I have a friend who plants and birds like all day long. She stands. Birds are like her spirit animal. So
Wow.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. Nature, it's all there. You know, it's just how you tap into it.
Awesome, guys. Well, hey, thank you all so much for listening. We truly appreciate your time. And I mean, you have so little time on this earth. The fact that you would sit here and spend an hour plus of it listening to us talk is really, really meaningful. So thank you all so much for that. All information about the podcast can be found, as well as Jane's work and links to it, can be found on revealingreality.com. If you head there, we have all the podcasts available, so you're more than welcome to go check out our archives. You can contact us if you have guests you'd like to see featured, questions that you're curious about, just want to say hi to us as people, or maybe you have something you think is worthy to be discussed on a podcast. Go on to revealingreality.com, go to the contact area, and I mean, we will have a segment coming soon where we just kind of rap about stuff you guys are interested in. So if you have any of that, by all means, it's available for you there. Of course, as well, if you enjoy the show, we would, I mean, from the bottom of our hearts, appreciate any donations you have in allowing us to keep this podcast going. Granted, you don't absolutely have to, but any small, minuscule effort is still the hugest thing for us. So we would really appreciate that. We also have our Amazon affiliate portal there. So if you do want to support us without actually having to just plain hand over money, you can go click the Shop Amazon button on the website and buy anything on Amazon just like you normally would, except we end up getting a percentage back of anything you purchase. So it changes nothing, especially if you already shop on Amazon. It just helps our show stay going, and we would really appreciate that. And of course, any other pertinent info you can find on that site. Without further ado, we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.